How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another Emerald City Hockey post-game live. This time with RJ. RJ,
Yes, good to
you're
be
back.
back.
Yeah, get to talk about some Kraken hockey. Unfortunately, don't get to celebrate a win like we were all able to yesterday after the game in Florida, but today in Tampa, the Lightning beat the Kraken 4-1 in Alex Stezka's first ever NHL start. RJ, I know everybody was rooting for him. Everybody wanted this game for Stezzy. And you know what? Stezzy did an incredible job of keeping this game close for the Kraken deep into that third period.
Yeah, definitely. I was really impressed with what Alex Stezka was able to do in this one. And there's a lot of nerves potentially in a game like this, right? It's not an easy spot. Second half of back-to-backs, and you're playing against a team with as much offensive firepower as the Lightning have. I mean, heck, your first shot faced in the NHL is from Nikita Kucherov of all people. And he stood strong and he gave the Kraken a chance to win this game. And that's really all you can ask out of your backup goalie.
It is. It is. I thought he was fantastic. Interesting to see another goalie back there this season that wasn't Philip Grubauer or Joey Daccord, just because I kind of mentioned this yesterday on the post game. Joey's been playing out of his mind, looking really great. Gru has struggled with his game this year. I wanted to see somebody else behind this Kraken defense and kind of see how it went. And to credit of the Kraken, I do feel like they've come out of the break, the Four Nations break, RJ, and they're playing pretty solid hockey. I thought they looked pretty good yesterday against Florida. I thought they looked good again today against the Lightning, or at least through most of the game. And I do feel like they're trying to be a little bit more conservative defensively, and certainly in this game anyway, help out the new goaltender.
Agreed. And I think we saw it yesterday in that 2-1 score line in that win over Florida, right? They're trying to help their goaltender more. They're trying to have more team collective defense. And I think we're seeing that come together. Even in this game, I think they may have played a better game tonight, really up until just those last couple goals by the Lightning, right? They might have played a better game today than they did yesterday. And I was so impressed by how the team just defended as a 5-man unit. I posted a little clip on Twitter from earlier in the game with the Beniers line with Dunn and Larson, just how well they were able to kind of switch off their assignments and support their goaltender and take away the passing lanes and just read things well and defend well. And of course, their goalie, Stezka, doing his job as well. And I think if that's going to be the new identity, I hate to even use the word identity when talking about this team because they can't string things together for more than like 2 games. So we'll see. I'll believe it when I see it. But if they're going to simplify things, if they're going to go for this approach, I think it's something that these last 2 games shows that it can work.
Yeah, and I said basically the same thing on Discord. I was like, I'll talk about the defense maybe more today than I did yesterday because I've been down this road before, right? We've seen a one game where things are different. I need to see it maybe a little bit more. I do think today was better from a team defensive standpoint than yesterday's game was. And I'm with you that today the Kraken, it did feel like played a better game. And certainly things like the winometer on Money Puck would say that. Still, Tampa able to get a lot of shots in down and around the crease. Like there's still some issues there defensively. Tampa's obviously a good offensive team, but it did feel like the Kraken just did a much better job of defending as a unit. They all seemed on the same page, which has really been a struggle for them throughout a lot of this season, but that wasn't really the case today. I wouldn't point to a lot of those Tampa goals and say like, this is, somebody's going off chasing into the corner and nobody's picking up that read or something like that, right? Like these were just kind of good plays by a good team versus maybe the breakdowns that we've seen from the Kraken in the past. So all of that stuff, definitely positive. Other positives to break down from this one that we will in just a sec, but of course want to thank our wonderful sponsor for these post-game lives, Queen Anne Beer Hall. RJ, you're back in the country, back in Seattle, back near the beer hall.
Yes, and it's great to be back near the beer hall. Dylan, I missed the pretzels. I missed the good German food. Look, I was having a great time in Italy with the Italian food, and I love Italian food. It's great. I couldn't get that pretzel and also the schnitzel that they have during Oktoberfest. I couldn't get that out of the back of my mind as I was thinking about the beer hall, and especially on the flight back yesterday. I was watching the post game on the flight. Hated to miss it, by the way. It sucks just be watching it and not and just watching you talk and wanting to jump in. Exactly, I felt so powerless, but especially too on that flight, felt so powerless without any food on that second flight. Just wanting that pretzel so bad.
Yes, yes. That's what's up, right? They're gonna have the third location. Queen Anne Beer Hall maybe needs to do something with one of the airlines. Get the pretzels on some flights. That would be it.
Alaska Airlines, Queen Anne Hall, maybe.
Maybe just cut me a percentage. That's all I'm saying. Kicking things off here, we've got the super chat from Evan. Even with the L, Stezka played pretty good for his first start. He really did. He looked poised, RJ. He looked ready. Obviously, like we talked about, right? Team defense in front of him was solid, all of that kind of stuff. But he had to make some good reactionary saves in this one. I thought he did a good job of knowing when to challenge, when to come up to the top of his crease, when to maybe stay a little bit further back, having to deal with the passing that this Tampa Bay Lightning team can utilize in the offensive zone, getting across his crease laterally. It really did look like Stezka belonged at the NHL level.
Definitely. And he was able to read the play really well too. I think about in the first period when the Lightning had, I think it was like that 3-on-1 kind of rush, and the play goes from Stezka's glove side to his blocker side. That's, it's a quick one-timer across, and he has to read that play in order to get across fast enough. But he does. He anticipates it kind of in a way that Joey Decord has been doing so well recently, of anticipating the play. And I was really impressed by that element. We know he's big. We know he's solid. We know he can take up a lot of net. But as far as the way he was able to move from side to side, that's what impressed me the most, having seen him now in this game situation. Also, got to show off the shirt.
Yep.
Here, wore that for Stezka today, and it worked out pretty well.
Yes, it did. But yeah, to your point, right? The athleticism on display from Stezka in this one, I thought was very impressive, and makes me intrigued to see kind of what the Kraken are going to do here as far as who that backup goaltender is going to be for the next little bit here. We'll see. As
I think he's earned another start whenever the time comes.
I think so too. Be in chat. Too bad they couldn't get Stezzy a win for his debut. I mean, that was really like the one thing missing. Obviously, the additional goals kind of getting tacked on there at the end when the game kind of got broken open for Tampa was, unfortunate. Maybe kind of spoils some of the day for Stezka. But yeah, team played pretty good in front of him. He played good, and I got to think for a guy like that making his first start this far in his career and everything, you take it.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully he feels confident and good about the way that he played in this one. I know it's tough when you don't get the win and when there's, you have allowed 3 goals, but man, those are not on him.
Yes. And then also be asking, how long has it been since we won the second half of a back-to-back? It feels like a lifetime. I believe they're 0-9 now on the second half of back-to-backs. So
is it 0-8 or 0-9? Did I get that wrong on the
I see Chris saying 0-9, and I think Julia texted me that the broadcast said 0-9 now. So
oh, great. Okay, so I underestimated on the broadcast.
You're coming back from the honeymoon. It's fine.
Yeah. We're all a little bit rusty here, except the Kraken. Actually, they don't feel rusty.
No,
but the last time they won the second half of a back-to-back would have been last season. Then, and I'm trying to see real quickly when that was. It was not their final back-to-back of the season.
No.
Is our 30 days has September, April, June. There's March 31st that exists, right?
Sure.
All right. Anyway, I'll find it later. I have to keep scrolling.
I was going to say it's probably
there we go.
Back
March 5th of last season. They beat Winnipeg on the road after beating Calgary. They won both halves of that back-to-back.
All right. Takes Afra's birthday, apparently. That's what they mean. Irad here, solid effort, had a plan, executed pretty well, just too much Vasilevsky. Right with the goal is a nice bright spot. Oh, I love Shane Wright coming across the middle of the zone there, RJ, and getting the tip on Brandon Montour's shot there from the point. I want to see more of that kind of stuff from Shane. Like Shane, it felt like going into the Four Nations break was getting more aggressive, right? And we talked about the mentality that he's had, the amount of points that he's been able to put up. But in these first 2 games coming back out of the Four Nations tournament break, RJ, he feels like kind of just extra in the zone, or like he's just kind of getting it. The game is starting to slow down for him a little bit more, and he just kind of knows where to put himself and where to be to help make things happen.
Agreed. He's reaching another level now. And I think if you just watch the games, you can see it. It's apparent in the plays that he's making both with and without the puck. We saw it last night. I really want to talk about this on post game last night with just the way that he was passing the puck and making players to create space for
Mhm.
his line mates. It was just something to see. And then again, doing that tonight, but scoring in a different way, right? Finding the space himself, going to that empty area. And that's where goals are scored. And that's honestly something I think the Kraken didn't really do a good enough job of for most of this game. They get a lot of shots on net. Andrei Vasilevsky, he's on his game. Look, he's going to stop everything that's clean that he can see. You need to get to those areas where you're tipping pucks, where you're screening him. Plays like that just take the goalie completely out of it. Kraken, I will say, I like a lot of what they did tonight. That was one area I thought they could have done better, especially knowing you're facing a good goalie. Get guys to those areas. That's how you score it. And Wright was kind of proof of concept there.
Yeah, I was going to talk about the same thing with Vasilevsky. I know the broadcast talked about it. That is something that you've got to do. We've talked about this before when the Kraken have gone up against really good goaltenders, and especially when those good goaltenders are feeling it the way it looked like Vasilevsky was feeling it tonight. You have to find ways to make life difficult for them, and the Kraken didn't really do that in this one. I thought they did a better job of it yesterday against Sergei Bobrovsky. Didn't really get some of those kind of crashing the net plays that I was really excited to see, like the goal from Capo Caco yesterday. There wasn't really an equivalent of that in this one. But with Shane and this goal specifically, right, you mentioned him facilitating offense kind of yesterday, and the way that he was making those passes, making those plays, creating space for his teammate, and then in this instance, finding space. It's just him reading a play differently. And I think that's what's really impressive to me, is that it's showing that not only can he kind of see a play, create a play, but he can see what other guys are doing and then go out there and exploit the openings that are there too, right? Like it's two sides of the same coin, but it's just showing how much his understanding and awareness have kind of improved out there, and I'm really happy to see that for him.
Yeah. Now, Dylan, I see Carl bringing it up. I see Ricky bringing it up and others in the chat. I think we have to talk about it. 14:03 of ice time for Shane tonight. Still not really being used any differently after 2 games out of the break. How do you feel about that? I mean, is it a problem? Look, he's producing. He's doing well. He's still building that
Mhm.
confidence. But does it start to bother you at some point that we're not seeing that uptick in ice time? And I know it's a back-to-back against 2 difficult teams. If I were asking, do we need to talk about it? I think it is. I think it is a legitimate talking point.
Well, I was going to say, like, I'm just going to say the same thing that I've been saying for months when we've talked about it, which is like, yes, I want him to be playing more. I understand the reasons why they're not playing him more. I mean, we can talk about it, but it does feel like kind of a little bit of a circular conversation at this point, right? Like almost all of us want it to happen. The team has explained why it's not happening, and that they want to still shelter him when he's ready, all of that kind of stuff. I don't know. I mean, yesterday it felt a little bit more like there was maybe reasons why, in that Florida game, just from maybe a matchup standpoint, first game back, all of that kind of stuff. Today it felt like, if you're kind of struggling to get offense maybe going, you can't even say that they were struggling to get offense going because they had 30 shots through the first 2 periods. So I don't know. I get it.
Okay, and I see
I don't
Zoe and
agree
Terra
with it, but
Lotus.
I get
Yeah,
it.
no, okay, and I see. All right, maybe nothing new has been said about it. I guess in the last few couple days, I've seen people kind of use the production as justification for that being the right course of action, and I guess I hadn't seen that before.
Yeah. I mean, there is that I think is a different conversation. That would be a new addition to the
Okay,
conversation, would be that, if that was the comments. And I think that there's probably two sides to that. But I think when it comes to just, should he be getting more ice time? Yeah, he probably should. Is he going to? Probably not anytime soon.
all right, fair
I don't
enough.
know.
We can
I mean,
move on.
unless you think differently.
No, it's probably not going to happen. I've it's been 2 games since the break. I've given up on it. So
Yeah. I mean, the bottom line is he is producing, and that's just what needs to happen. So, we'll kind of just, I guess, go from there. I don't know. There's just so many
it's
larger
all right. Let's move
conversations
on. Let's
around
move
it. I
on.
know. Let's see. I wish there was a way a score could actually tell the story from Terrible Lotus, right? Yeah, and this is a good example game of that, RJ, right? We talked about it. The Kraken able to kind of, get 30 shots through 2 periods, right? We can debate about how quality those shots are, but the point is that's a lot of shots for the Seattle Kraken to get. They're able to play the Tampa Bay Lightning extremely close in this one. Like I said, it wasn't really until about the halfway through the third period that Tampa is able to start kind of, they get the Kucherov goal, they get the Glendening goal, and things kind of get busted open for them. And then all of a sudden you end up with this 4-1 score that doesn't really tell the whole story of how good the Kraken actually played in this one.
Yeah, and I think you'll sometimes see that, when you have the empty net goal that kind of adds one on top of it. But still, yeah, I think this was a closer game than the score would indicate. Goaltending, I mean, really, it's we talked a lot about Alex Stezka too, and of course we talked a little bit about Vasilevsky and how good he was. But man, the Kraken probably deserved 1 or 2 goals before the one that they actually did get, and that's goaltending can make a big swing in scores like that and what they should be. And I think we saw it. It feels like the Kraken haven't run into a ton of really good goaltending performances this season, but this was certainly one of them.
This did feel like one of the tougher ones that they've had, and I do see El Bell right here in chat. Shane goal, Stezzy debut, and we don't have to see Vasilevsky again this season. I'm calling it a win. The fact that we don't have to worry about him for the next little bit is important, and yeah, some of the individual kind of pushes too for that. Capo Caco had 6 shots on goal, and I believe he had those 6 shots on goal around like halfway through the game. Like a lot of the came early, that work from Capo Caco, and then Jared McCann adding 5 of his own, Matty Beniers with 4 guys on this team. They were trying to get the scoring going.
Yeah, and I noticed that a lot from Jared McCann too. I think he was feeling confident after scoring that goal last game, and I like to see that from him, that he kept shooting the puck. It seemed like he was maybe frustrated after a couple of them that Vasilevsky turned away. But I think also a moment where I knew that this was just going to be one of those Vasilevsky games. Jared McCann came in with a pretty good amount of time and space in the first period, right?
Mm-hmm.
He had a good shot from his normal left side location. Vasilevsky didn't even go down.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of threw an arm out, turned it away into the netting. And I just, oh man, he's on it right now. This is going to be one of those just effortless games from Andrei Vasilevsky. And true enough, it was that way the whole way.
Yes, it was. Obviously all of the welcome backs for you there in
Appreciate
chat,
that, everybody.
RJ. As we go through that, Jeremy Stezzy did what he could. Kraken just couldn't solve Vasilevsky. I like to think the players were letting him know it wasn't his fault after the game. I'm sure, that's all in there. Like they don't necessarily say that stuff out loud. They are professional athletes. Like they've been through this process all the way to getting to the National Hockey League. But everybody knows what's up when the game is over, kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, one thing I noticed too after the game, and I don't know if you had the chance to see it because I know you're prepping the graphic and getting everything ready for post game, but just the way that all the Kraken players skated right over to Stezka after the game and kind of gave him, hugs and taps on the mask and everything like that, to kind of celebrate his first game there. But you got to imagine that kind of sends the message as well that like, hey, you did your job.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody would say that he didn't in this one for sure. General Pancakes, this whole game felt reversed from normal. Significantly better play across the first 2 periods and kind of dropping the ball for the third. And I don't know if you saw, RJ, I know there was a lot of talk about it on the Discord a couple days ago. It was, and I believe it was the Micah Blake McCurdy kind of charts for all of the teams around the NHL. And just from period to period and kind of like how the expected goal differential, I think it was, goes for them. And the Kraken have this very unique chart of really just starting, not be that great, and then just this massive uptick at the end in the third period. And I do agree with General Pancakes. This was not that, right? And the broadcast had the graphic up in the third period for this one. Kraken are 6th best in the league when it comes to goals scored in the third period. I believe it was 71 goals coming into this one. Obviously, the Shane Wright goal would add another one to that. This felt more like what a hockey game between teams like this should be, RJ, right? You have a team that comes in, tries to hang with the good team, and then they do a good job of that through most of it, and then the underdog kind of fades a little at the very end.
Yeah, it makes sense. And as much as we don't like the result, it was kind of refreshing. It's really for the last two games to see games where the Kraken, I mean, you had yesterday, right, where they're defending a lead late and trying to hang on. And then this one where, yes, they are trailing, but it just felt like it was kind of close the whole way and they didn't have to rely on this comeback magic where they just don't show up for 40 minutes. It's nice to see that at least for two games, that that's not the case.
Yes, for sure. And Olivia, results suck, but the game was still so fun to watch and felt enjoyable. Even if they lose, games like this are what makes this team fun to watch. And yes, unfortunately, we haven't had as many of these games this year, RJ, but these kind of close, real battles where the Kraken are in it until the end, or at least close to the end, and they can hang with kind of anybody in the league, and they have that effort level, and they're able to get a good amount of shots off and all of that kind of stuff. Like that is why people enjoy watching hockey, because in those close games, anything can happen at any given time. And this was definitely a good one for sure. Super chat here from Kitty B Kraken. Second big one in 2 days from Kitty B Kraken, I will add. So thank you for that, Kitty B Kraken. Super chat to welcome back RJ. But could I also ask you to settle an issue at home? My wife keeps telling me that the Kraken never succeed when pulling their goalie. Could you please tell her what is right?
Well, thank you for the super chat, Kitty B Kraken. I appreciate the welcome back. You can tell your wife that it does sometimes work. It doesn't always work, but sometimes. And I mean, we just talked about the game script the Kraken usually have, where they dig themselves a hole and then try and get out of it. Part of that has been pulling the goalie late. I mean, we saw it with that huge comeback against Vancouver, really both comebacks against the Vancouver Canucks recently this season. And then a couple other times too. I'm trying to remember the last time that it worked, but the Kraken have actually been remarkably successful late in games when pulling their goalie. This one didn't look quite as good. I mean, you had the early goalie pull that was weird. The offside overturned goal with the empty net. First of all, you don't often see an empty net goal overturned on a review like that. And then also you don't often see the cross ice one-timer slap shot empty net goal too. So that was kind of a weird one.
I was really like that when that happened. I forget exactly what I said out loud, but I was just like, what is that? Like, what is Jake Gensel doing? Like, why do you do that? None of it made sense to me there.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I was just going to agree, right? Like it is still one of those things where, look, the alternative is realistically, you're just going to lose anyway, right? You might as well do the thing that gives you a slightly higher percentage chance of completing a comeback. And so you just roll with those odds, right? Like that's just the way the math kind of works out there.
I got to say, I think Kitty B Kraken, that is good strategy with the super chat there. That way you do not have to tell your wife that she is wrong, which is usually a bad idea. I think we can just say what we think is right.
Yeah. And then here we go, RJ. This is, we've talked about Stezka. It makes sense that this question is going to pop up. This from Roy. With Stezzy's performance today, does that mean Gru will never be brought back up? And now we both said that we thought Stezka played well enough that, he's earned another start in our eyes. This is a little different, though. Do you think he's played well enough compared to all of this, the larger sample size we've seen from Gru, that this should just be the way the Kraken kind of finish out the year? Let Grubauer play with Coachella Valley, do what he can do down there, help out the Firebirds, and then just kind of ride with Stezka for realistically what I would assume would just be a handful of starts down the stretch.
Yeah, I think either way, Joey Decord is going to play the vast majority of games for the Kraken down the stretch as long as he's healthy. I wouldn't go as far as to say that this start means that Grubauer is never getting called up. I think it probably earns Stezka another start or two. But really, I think there was another game today, the Firebirds game, that was going on simultaneously with the Kraken game, that was probably a bigger indicator of whether or not Grubauer is going to be called up again. And it's really just Grubauer's play, how he does with the Firebirds. I think Stezka's going to do his thing, and unless he lights the world on fire and looks amazing, then he's going to be there for those games until Grubauer can prove himself. But really, it's just, how does Grubauer do in the AHL? I think that's the biggest question as to whether or not he gets called up again. He won. The Firebirds did win the game. I think he had maybe a couple goals you might want back. So it still seems like a work in progress for Grubauer, but really, I think that's going to be the biggest factor in whether Grubauer gets called up again.
Yeah, there's a couple like directions that I feel like I can go from here, and I'm trying to think of the way to do it in like the least negative way. But I will say this: I'll ask you this, RJ.
Okay.
Do you think that there would be a scenario in which the Kraken are thinking, look, we know we're gonna ride Joey Decord really the rest of this way. We're talking about like 3, 4, 5 starts the rest of the way. We're paying Philip Grubauer kind of regardless, even if Grubauer kind of figures things out at the AHL level. We know the scenario with the Kraken and kind of where they're going and where they're headed this season. Grubauer is down there on Coachella Valley. It's a team that has good playoff aspirations and everything. Do they just go, you know what? Let's just give him a playoff run down in Coachella Valley. We're paying him anyway. Could be a good confidence boost for him to have some success in the playoffs down there, and just kind of just go with that, kind of regardless of if he really does pick up his play, just because you know you're not going to be starting him at the NHL level anyway.
I think I could see that actually. And you know what? The Firebirds have had some good experience with NHL level goaltending or former NHL goaltenders, right? Leading them for playoff runs. So I could see that as a possibility. Who knows? It might actually be what's best for Philip Grubauer. And look, I'm looking at the schedule ahead. I think they only have, what, 2 more back-to-backs all season. So it's really not a whole lot of starts that the backup would get at the NHL level. I think it might just make more sense to get Grubauer more games down there and kind of ride with him there the rest of the season. I will say too, and again, I don't want to be too negative toward Grubauer. I'm trying to frame this as a positive for Stezka, but it was really nice to watch a Kraken game where the backup goalie was in, and at no point did I ever feel worried like, oh, this is going to get ugly or this is going to be bad, right? There was just no worries in my mind, and that was just really nice and kind of made me realize how the last few didn't feel that way.
Interesting. I did feel that way a little bit with Seska, but
You did?
it was with the rebound control. Like I did leave that out earlier when we were talking about how
Okay.
well he played. He played well in a lot of ways. There were some rebounds that should not have been there, or pucks loose in the crease and stuff like that. And those situations elevated my already too high blood pressure. But no, I understand what you're saying, and I do get it, right? Like there was like kind of a sense of the inevitable happening at times with Philip Grubauer that did not feel like the case today, even though there were some maybe close calls.
Yeah, and with the rebound control too, though, it just felt like the team had decided in front of him to just be there for those and play really well. And it was kind of apparent early on, at least in my
Right.
mind. So that's one of the reasons I wasn't as
Right.
worried about it.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if we see that from the team, and kind of going into the next chat here from your head. I thought the defensive scheme was on point today. I thought they were cohesive, anticipated well too, got in the passing lanes. That shot by Tampa, just a tough shot. Um, I'm curious to see, right? Like it's only been 2 games. We talked earlier about how this team isn't always super consistent. I'm curious to see how much of this was also everybody stepping up because it is somebody in net who is making their NHL debut. And it would not be the first time that an NHL team has really stepped things up defensively to help out the guy who's making his first start in the crease. And so I am curious to kind of see, I as much as I said, I want a game where we have somebody else in the crease. It's really, I want a 4 or 5 game sample size of somebody else in the crease, because I do kind of want to see how things go. And, we'll see how the defense can kind of continues to work. Again, defense, big improvement from where they were prior to the 4 Nations break. It's still a work in progress though, right? The defense that they're running, they're still committed to the zone defense. They did a better job of having the forwards come back and help, and the defensemen did a better job of staying conservative and really picking and choosing when they were going to go aggressively challenge Tampa Bay Lightning, forecheckers and stuff like that. I still think fundamentally they just need to be running a different system. I think they either need to be running a different form of zone, or they need to get away from the zone defense, because I don't know that you can kind of always rely on playing a watered down or overly cautious version of a system defensively. I don't know that that serves you in the long run, but it has served them this weekend.
Yeah, no, it definitely has. And I mean, I'm curious to see, especially your takeaways, just keeping a closer eye on the defense and how it plays the next few games, because I always enjoy your takeaways with that, and especially after the break too. feels like they've had a little bit of time. I mean, we forget. I know it's like they've been off for this long amount of time, but they had a few days also to get some practices in before that first game against Florida, and I do think it shows a little bit. But there's still work to be done.
Yes, yes. And like I said, yesterday's shot chart was kind of tough. Today's shot chart isn't a lot better. So I do think that that's, something that again needs to be talked about, but not trying to like really say that they did bad today. It was definitely a huge step up and big improvements there. Kara, loved seeing all the guys come out onto the ice to congratulate Stez after the game, even after a loss. Also the Firebirds and Groovy beating the Barracuda this afternoon, which is a big win from them. Yes, it is. And the Firebirds, I mean, top of the Pacific Division, in the AHL. So again, got to be thinking about a long playoff run for them, at least hopefully. And it would be nice maybe if Philip Grubauer was there and able to do that. And I do wonder on Grubauer's part too, if you're thinking potential buyout this offseason, it does give you a chance to play some meaningful hockey. It's not going to be at the NHL level, obviously, but a chance to show that you could still have some big game moments to you.
Yeah, and it's more of a showcase than sitting on the bench at the NHL level, right? I think you kind of need that. And yeah, I love to see CV at the top of the Pacific Division, at least points wise. It is a tight race.
It
64
is.
points for CV, 63 for Colorado, Calgary, and Ontario. And they've got some games in hand as well. So yeah, every point really, really matters.
Yes, it is. It is going to be a fun kind of like last little bit of the season here. Jake talking Tampa's a bad matchup for us. Only one win in the franchise history against Tampa Bay Lightning, RJ. Contrast that with the other Florida team that the Kraken beat yesterday, where it seems like everything kind of has to go right for Florida to beat the Kraken, just in the same way everything kind of has to go right for the Kraken to beat the Lightning. Hockey.
It is really striking too, especially given that the Kraken tend to play those teams in back-to-back games just because of the location, right? How good of a matchup Florida is and how bad of a matchup Tampa is just stylistically. And I'd love to hear it just quickly, I guess, Dylan, your thoughts on why you think that is. I mean, for me, again, my just basic guess at it is just that Florida doesn't necessarily play with a ton of speed. Like they're big and they're skilled, but it's just something that I don't know. The Kraken, they can get a little sloppy sometimes, like in transition if they're not careful. Florida feels like they're not able to burn the Kraken on that in the way that like Tampa with some of their guys, especially Kucherov, have in the past. But that's just my basic read.
Yeah, I feel like it's more of Florida, just for whatever reason, does a really bad job of handling the Kraken in the defensive zone, right? In Florida's zone. And we kind of saw that yesterday. I mean, guys were just kind of getting lost all over the place on that Florida defense. And I don't know why that is, because it's not like the Kraken have really ever had superstars. We're seeing this now under two different coaching staffs, two different systems and offensive philosophies. I don't know what it is. It is interesting. Yeah, there's the speed component between Tampa and Florida to talk about. But what's weird is I would still classify both of them as transition teams, right? Like Florida is still trying to get their transition against you. I mean, that is their whole thing, is like they're just going to hammer you, coming up the ice. It's slow, but it is big, it's physical, and they know what they're doing. And I don't know, maybe it is just the speed thing. I don't know. I think there's something to the defensive zone, though. I think the Kraken have always found ways to score on the Panthers in a way that they've never really been able to replicate consistently against other franchises. So maybe it's just a Bobrovsky thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but your guess is as good as mine. Well, no, your guess is probably better than mine.
It's something. Michael with the super chat here. Despite the loss, the game was a good break from working on my taxes. ECH super chats are eligible charitable donations, right? As much as I would love to give a big emphatic yes, especially going into tax season, I don't know that I legally can.
Yeah, I don't know that we should be giving that advice. I consult your tax professional to see. I would say, give the super chat and then consult your tax professional to see if it is a charitable deduction.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't ask my parents if super chats to Dylan are a charity case or not.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Yeah, there's that conversation around the ice time there. How's it going, Pablo? Afra's doing good. Afra's doing good. She's chilling in here as always.
I saw her yesterday on the plane. That was great.
Yes. She was
Well, on
ready to
post
get
game on the
back
plane. She
in.
was not on the plane with me,
Yeah, I was gonna say,
unfortunately.
yeah, she's gotten very talented. Um, Jake, if he's still not getting time after the trade deadline, then maybe it's worth a small discussion. But what's there to say? And Andrew also saying might happen after the trade deadline. I know that was kind of maybe, that's still kind of part of the idea, maybe, RJ, about why Shane's not getting the ice time. That being said, I don't know who they're totally giving that time to with like Yanni Gord out and stuff like that. So we'll just kind of have to see.
Yeah, we'll have to see. And it is one thing when they get back home that I'd love to ask Dan about, and just is there a timeline or a plan to maybe ramp up those minutes? Maybe not now, but at some point.
Yeah, yeah. And then Terrible Lotus, was this the game with the least penalties this season? I mean, there was only the one penalty, RJ, right? Kraken get the one power play chance, 0 penalties taken by the Kraken. I mean, I for the Kraken, this does kind of feel like a one penalty game does feel kind of like the floor. I can't remember a game with no penalties.
I feel like I remember one earlier this
Maybe there
season that
was in
had
that
no penalties either
homestand,
way. I think
at
the
the
Kraken
towards the
are,
beginning of the year.
and especially this year's Kraken team is just insanely low penalties. I mean, for and against, but especially for. They just do not take penalties this year. And it feels like they've been in a lot of games. So there's just been maybe 1 or 2 total penalties. But
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm not going to try and send Viren to get an answer on that. But I wouldn't be shocked if Viren had an answer on that pretty soon.
No, but there was like that stretch of games where like the Kraken went 2 or 3, maybe even 4 games,
And there it is,
where they didn't take a penalty during that homestand. I remember like the Rangers game being in there, stuff like that. What's the answer?
yeah. Viren says there are 2 others with 1 Kraken power play and 0 PKs.
Yeah. So there we go. Cool. Think if they keep playing like tonight, we could finish the rest of the season with a 600 points percentage or better after looking at the schedule. I mean, without looking at the schedule, because I don't have that up in front of me, I can work on getting that up in front of me. 600 seems aggressive for this team. I think, like I said yesterday after that Florida game, that's the blueprint that you need to win. Is you're going to have to kind of gut out low scoring games. You're going to have to get some depth scoring production. You're going to have that Matty Beniers line really show up and take the other team's top line out of it. And then you need Joey Decord to just kind of do what Joey has done all year, which is play at a level that goaltenders aren't supposed to be playing at. And so without looking at the schedule or diving too far into the schedule completely, I'm going to say that might be a little high. 500 though, maybe.
Yeah, 500. I mean, what, 600 points percentage is what, like 98 points, something like that.
Yeah.
So that's high.
Yeah. It still feels high for this group, even though they're getting better. It still feels high for where they're at this season. And looking at the schedule, 500 feels right.
Yeah, no, 500 does feel right. I mean, if they can keep playing like this, I think they can get back to 500, but not much higher than that.
Yeah. And I do agree with Jake pointing out too, going back to the empty net discussion, we've been pretty good at avoiding empty net goals this season, especially early in the season. There was quite a few games it felt like where the Kraken did have the goalie pulled and they did not surrender that empty net goal. Like and I do remember talking about that on these post games.
Yeah. Didn't Viren post the numbers in chat here?
Yes, the Kraken have played 73-59 with their net empty this season, most in the NHL. Second place is Colorado with 64-09. Yeah, and I mean, I remember being in Toronto for the game on Halloween where the Kraken pulled Joey with, I mean, it was a lot of time left. My mind immediately went to 6 minutes. That's aggressive, but it was like close to 5 minutes. And kind of asking Dan about that, and he was just like, it's what it says I should do. I think Dan is on board with just the whole, like, the analytics say it, so I'm just gonna do it, and I'll be aggressive with it because, again, what do you have to lose? You're losing anyway.
Exactly. I think it's the right call. And I do like that he is, at least on that issue, kind of more analytically minded there.
Yes. Do you expect Shane Wright to hit a sophomore slump next year like Maddie did, or are you more hopeful about his talent? From Matthew.
Oh man, that question. Well, it gets into the ice time thing a little bit too, because I think it's so. That's one of the reasons that even though he's producing right now, I think it's important that you ramp up the challenge and the workload and the quality of competition a little bit now, so that he's seen it and he's gotten used to it before this season is over. So he's not being thrown right into that next year. And so I think the more that you play him down the stretch and give him those harder assignments, the less likely it is that he has a sophomore slump. But I think if you keep giving him 14 minutes a night against sheltered competition, yeah, I could totally see a sophomore slump happen for him.
I'm really split on this issue. I think I understand what you're saying, and I agree with that usually for most players. I think when you talk about guys that were drafted really high and have a very high offensive ceiling, I don't worry about that as much, just because I think once the game slows down for them, once they start thinking the game at a certain level, they can just kind of produce, kind of regardless of how much time they're getting and regardless of how quality the competition is that they're facing. And I think that Shane Wright has the potential to be part of that group. And so on that side of things, I want to say, I don't know that that it'll necessarily matter for him if he's getting matched up more. Also, unlike Maddie, he has Maddie to take some of the matchups, right? Like Maddie, if he's still playing well with a Jaden Schwartz and a Capo Caco, and is the guy for you who is going to be chewing up 20 minutes and on your first line and going to be the line that the Kraken are going to send out there during home games against whatever other team's top line is out there. Shane's still going to be getting better matchups than really what Maddie was getting in Maddie's sophomore year, when he was just the only guy, right, for the Kraken that they could send out there to be in those situations. So I think that is going to help a little bit. Where I get concerned about a sophomore slump with Shane Wright is strictly when it comes to things like he's still shooting over 20%. Nobody keeps that up for that long and year over year. So I think like there is some room for regression there just because of strictly that kind of numbers based thing. However, if he changes things to become more of a volume based shooter, which is something that we know the Kraken wants him to become, that is a message that he is getting so that his shot total spikes to more than just one a game, which is what he's averaging right now. I think he can have the same goal production without having the insanely high shooting percentage, right? The shooting percentage can kind of naturally come back down to something that's more reasonable, but he can continue to kind of have the actual numbers, counting stats production, just because he's offsetting that by taking many more shots, by being more aggressive, by getting more ice time, which lets him be out there for longer and have more of those opportunities. So, but the bottom line is I think Shane is kind of in that special tier of players where I feel like just as they figure it out, they just figure it out. And I don't know that things or matchups matter as much for them as it would for, say, somebody who's more of like a true middle six player.
Yeah, well, I hope you're right on that.
Yeah, and I was looking at earlier today. I was looking at players like Sasha Barkov, who we saw yesterday, and Nathan McKinnon, and some other of the top kind of scorers around the league. And I'm not saying that Shane's going to be one of these guys, but the age 22 season, right? And I talked about this on the deep dive earlier this year with Shane about this being the make or break year to set him up for next year. Like next year, that age 22 season is really when a lot of guys that are high draft picks, it does click for them. That has slowed down for them. They've physically matured to the point where they can handle things and they don't have to think about that side of the game anymore. I really do think that it's going to be the time for Shane to step up. And based on what we've seen from him this last like month and a half, I think he's going to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So there we
And
go.
again, I don't want it to seem like, as I say, I'm like worried about, next year potentially. I love what I'm seeing from Shane Wright. And I'm excited to see like what we get from him next year, because just watching him, you could tell that high end talent is there. And so I don't want to seem like I'm pessimistic about it, because I am quite optimistic. I just have that worry in the back of my mind. That's all.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think it's fair, right? Like, and it's very fair. Andrew, alternatively, do you think they know we're moving on from Gru regardless and want Stezzy to have more NHL experience? Just going back to that idea of maybe Stezzy hanging out for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess splitting that into two parts, I think the front office probably has a pretty good idea of what the plan is with Grubauer. I couldn't tell you what it is. I know what I think it is, but um, as far as the second part, as far as wanting to give Steska more experience, I still don't think that they would really necessarily see him as an NHL backup next year. I think you're going to want somebody with more than now one game of NHL experience if you're rolling into next season. Maybe you bring him back as a piece in CV again. Maybe he would like that. But I think you have to go with a more experienced backup to Joey Daccord if Grubauer is not part of the plan.
Yeah, and I just think again, you're gonna have to. You can't have both Joey's extension and Gru's contract on the books. Like you can, I just don't see a team doing it.
Yeah, agreed.
That's basically it. Going down in chat, I do see Cole mentioning Braden Point's shooting percentage and saying Braden Point keeps a shooting percentage around 19%. He does. He's a very net fronts in the crease style player. He's able to have that extremely high shooting percentage, but it very much matches with like this kind of identity that Braden Point has that is very uniquely Braden Point, I will add. So he's able to do it, but that is, I would very much call Braden Point an outlier rather than the rule, right?
Yes, I would too. And also, you just keep in mind the players that he's playing with as well. You got Nikita Kucherov on your line for a long stretch of your career. It probably helps with that as well.
It definitely does. Definitely does. But hey, look, like Braden Point is an example of, and he's not the biggest guy either. He's not 6 feet. He's listed at 175. Perfect example of just go to the net, right? Like if you can find the will within you and you can withstand that punishment, you're willing to put your body on the line, you can go and be successful. And that's what Braden Point has done. He has made himself successful by playing, obviously he's a good player in his own right, but by playing a style of hockey that, rewards that effort. And that's what we talk about when we talk about the Kraken maybe needing to be more of a net front team, going to the net front, being in those dirty areas, putting their bodies on the line, all of that stuff. It is very tough. It is not something that many guys can, just take on and shrug it off as it's whatever. But when you can, the results speak for themselves there.
Yeah, definitely. And there is a reason not everyone does it. It is brutal going to the net that often, but you can make a pretty good career out of doing it if you're willing to.
Yes. And as Cole's saying, selective shooter. Yes. I have looked at Braden Point's like shot charts, and basically if he's not within like 5 to 10 feet of the crease, he's just not going to shoot the puck. He knows what's up.
Yep. I mean, we saw a little bit of that today, even too, just with trying to find creative passes and stuff, even though he had some good looks.
Yeah. Yeah. But fun player to watch for sure. Jeremy, it feels like a real possibility Stevenson will be taking 3C minutes while making 6.25 mil at some point. I mean,
I think
yes.
that was always the plan.
Yeah.
It's just how far along the line is that, right? I think that was always the plan when you signed him to a 7-year deal. You know that by say year 4, unless it goes disastrously with Matty Beniers and Shane Wright, Stevenson is going to be your third best center at best. So I think that was always part of the plan. It just might come sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it does feel like it's coming sooner. But again, how many times have we watched teams, RJ, that have had a plan like this, something like this, and well, right? The plan's got to get thrown out because the young guy's coming up and is maybe playing too good, too fast. Oh, what a terrible problem for us to have, right? Shane might be ready a year sooner than we thought he was. Like that is still something that could possibly happen. And I know it hasn't just been that side of things. It hasn't just been Shane's development that's kind of making us think that way about next season. But I still think it's one of those, like, I don't hate it when general managers kind of hedge a little bit, right? Like you need to have somebody capable of being a 2C. You want it to be your young guy, but just in case you have somebody else there. Whether you sign that, whether you make it a 7-year hedge, I think is a different discussion.
Yeah, I think we both wouldn't have minded a 2 or 3 year hedge, but yeah,
yes.
Again, different story.
Yes. I think 2-3 years is fine. The 7 years is a different conversation, but I do understand the philosophy there around it.
Yeah, and as Jake says, like with the projected cap increases, look, that contract will never be good, but it will be less bad.
Yes. It won't be a disaster or anything for you. And then I agree with B. Stevenson's not going anywhere. Like, again, even with the cap increases, that contract's not
Yeah,
gonna be
unmovable.
doing anything. And
Significant
Jeremy's,
negative value.
Jeremy's saying he puts up points, so it's not terrible. I mean, he does contribute. It's I think different than what maybe they probably wanted. I mean, 40 points in 57 games, like that is good contribution for a guy that's going to be a middle six center for you. Like, I do think that offensive production has been fine. The stuff that bothers me more so is the defensive liability side of things.
Yeah, and I mean, we've gone over the numbers,
Yeah.
but yeah, I won't belabor
But
the point.
otherwise,
Yeah.
face-offs and stuff like that, like he's doing all the other stuff that he was brought in to do. Like he is
Yeah.
doing it.
And again, it's just not for any acquiring team or the prospect of moving him. It's not even necessarily what he is right now. It's what he's going to be over the next 6 years. And the downside on that is pretty scary.
Oh yeah, I just meant as far as like him not being terrible.
Okay, yeah. I thought I was talking about being movable or not.
Yeah. No, very few players on 7-year contracts are movable easily, like kind of regardless. So, all right. I guess, I mean, I'm down at the bottom of chat. So if, anybody has anything else, feel free to throw it in. RJ,
In the meantime,
yeah.
sorry. In the meantime, though, I did want to talk about the Patreon because we released the Patreon schedule this week. It's going to be a very busy Patreon week, starting on Tuesday. So if you want to watch the very next Kraken game against St. Louis with us, you can do that. Terror of the Deep patrons will have the ECH live commentary. It's always a really fun time watching the game together with all of you. We got a live chat going like we do right now, and should be interesting to see how the Kraken do after 2 pretty solid efforts, then playing against the Blues team that should be, I think, a step down in terms of opponent. They should be able to have some more success. And then the very next day, Dylan, you have your prospect chat. Want to tease that for everyone a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I was just trying to find like the best hockey news draft preview or future watch issue I could find to show you specifically, RJ. But yeah, no, I'm excited for this week's prospect chat because after doing the kind of deep dive into all of the Kraken players, from like them being kind of drafted and then going through their different respective organizations, development cycles, and thinking about the different ways that players are developing, I kind of wanted to look at the Kraken, the kind of current Kraken prospects, and talk about what sort of development paths I think they should all individually kind of be on. Not necessarily straight up like, oh, this is the areas in their game that they're weak and they need to improve upon. It's more so, what can they do to become the most successful versions, NHL versions of themselves? And then what can the Kraken as an organization do to make that happen for them and then future prospects and stuff. So it's a little bit different. It's not necessarily straight up watching prospect tape like we normally do. It's more of kind of digging into some of the off ice stuff and seeing what can the Kraken do to make these guys good NHL players.
Well, that sounds really interesting. I'll definitely want to give that a watch. I mean, I've been enjoying kind of looking at the prospect pool as a whole and then down to the individual guys, kind of seeing where everybody projects to be, because I've been looking at that for my Armchair GM stream, which is the very next day. And, we're going to be looking at the short term. Of course, the trade deadline is 12 days away. So it's coming up very, very soon. And so we'll talk about some potential stuff at the deadline, but also look a little bit more long-term as well. And I think just how the prospects, I think your prospect chat, especially, actually might inform kind of some of how I talk about the Armchair GM stream, because I think when you talk bigger picture with this team, like how the prospects turn out, how this prospect pool projects to turn out is going to make a big difference on kind of what they do.
I was going to say, I might be stealing some of your Armchair GM stuff a little bit to be doing. There might be like some Armchair GM moving of rosters and lineups on the prospect chat. So yeah, that might happen.
Right. Love to hear that. So that's going to be really good. And so yeah, big week of Patreon stuff. And of course, if you're on the fence about trying it, want to check it out, this is a good month to do it, because you sign up for the 1 week free trial. Even right now, you get all of the bonus content because it's all just jam-packed into this week. So looking forward to joining all the patrons for that. But just wanted to plug that while we kind of gave people a chance to put some more stuff in chat.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's where I was going to.
You probably had a better segue, but I got us.
It's all good. It's all good. It's all good. Happy to talk about it. And then it was just to go back to, where was it? Viren had pointed, because when we were talking about Chandler Stevenson, at least he's an option for power play faceoffs, which I suppose is more you could say for Belmar. That is. I wanted to mention, RJ, just what have you thought of the 2 power play units that we've seen these last two days? Because I really like one of them.
Yeah, I do too, and I think it's probably the same unit that we're talking about. Yeah, I mean the power play, it's tough because they were really struggling going into the break, and so obviously they needed to do some work on it, and some mixed results, right? I think one of the power play units looks good, but still some work on the other to do.
Yeah, but I like having the young guys kind of around each other, let them cook, let them do their thing. I just think that that's going to be better for this group long term.
It feels like they're willing to get more creative too, just being all around
totally
each other
are.
and together.
They totally are, and I do feel like being around Shane and what Shane's doing, and being around Capo Caco and what Capo Caco's doing, Matty Beniers does feel like he is starting to add a little bit of creativity back into his game. We saw the kind of attempt at like a spin move. I think it was in the game yesterday from Matty Beniers coming in on like a one-on-one, and he kind of tries to do a spin move, doesn't end up getting it on the other side of the 360, but that's okay, because that's just not something that we would have seen from Matty Beniers at all before. And so, but I think that is the kind of stuff that, look, good, productive point scorers in the NHL, they have that. They do create. They see time and space, and they take advantage of that. And I think that power play unit with all the young guys on it is certainly doing so right now. I want to ask your opinion as well, RJ, just because it's kind of shocking that we haven't talked about him yet, and you haven't had the opportunity to talk about him at all since he's been back. But Jordan Eberle played again today.
Oh, that's right.
Didn't get a ton of ice time. They're obviously still easing him back in. He does look pretty rusty to me. RJ doesn't necessarily look weak or like he's still dealing with the injury, but he does look rusty. Your thoughts on the captain?
Yeah, well, it's good to have him back, and I think you're seeing the impact, just maybe like in the room really with the guys. Look, you've had 2 games that are more or less like focused, and they're playing pretty well, and maybe you can chalk that up a little bit to the captain being back and kind of getting everybody focused and on task. As for the on the ice stuff, look, as you said, they're easing him in. I think he hasn't looked great, but my expectations for him were very low, as I think they kind of should be for everybody, right? My expectations for the first game back was literally just get through the game without re-injuring yourself. That's all you need to do. Like, just get reps, get back into the game. And he had a couple shots, he had some decent chances, but clearly he's just playing a 4th line role right now. Looks rusty. I mean, there was one particularly bad turnover in this game that I remember in the D zone that kind of set up a couple lightning chances. Matty Beniers, though, did a really good job to kind of bail him out on that, making good defensive play, took the puck behind the net, just slowed things down for his captain. I love that from Matty as well, recognizing the situation. But he'll ramp back up a little bit. I don't think he's ready for the top 6 role quite yet, but he'll get there.
Yeah. No, I'm with you there. I am intrigued to see whenever he gets reunited with Jared McCann, presumably on Shane Wright's wing. Should be fun. Should be fun.
Definitely. Just give him a few more games to ramp up to it.
Yeah. I see Jake here. Dylan, how do you feel about Wang in the 2nd round? Looking ahead to the draft, I haven't watched him that much, and with defensive defensemen, like, you really need to watch them. I'm still just kind of diving into the top 10 guys. I haven't gotten close to the 2nd round guys yet, but I mean, anytime you're talking about a defenseman with that size, right, the 6'6" size, and being well over 200 pounds and all of that kind of stuff, it's intriguing. And I think that you can make those guys work, but as like players like a Jamie Alexiak would teach us or whatever, it's a really long road with the big guys that don't really have a ton of the puck skills. And I think that that's kind of where he's at right now at 17. And so I think it's one of those where you can draft him, but then development becomes key and patience becomes very key, because you can draft him this year and then you might not see him until 2030, right, on your NHL roster. And so you got to kind of be like, okay, are we in a place as an organization to do that and to try to help him kind of become that best version of himself? And I think that those are questions that teams should ask themselves, and then we don't always see them do that come draft day when they're sitting there and they're looking down and they're like 6'6", 220 defenseman's on the board, pick 50, let's go.
Yep, there's a lot of that.
So I think that would be intriguing. But again, that's a very general rule. I haven't really watched him that much. Obviously, he's had kind of a pretty, quick rise this season, especially just in jumping leagues into the OHL and everything. So I'd have to check him out a little bit more. Real quick before we go, RJ, just because I've been dying to do this, and I'd love to let everybody have a chance here at the very end. Which cover of Future Watch more cringe? Meet your 2019 Stanley Cup champion Winnipeg Jets.
I remember
which came
that
out in 2015.
I remember that
with Scheifele, Ehlers, and Jacob Trouba on the Jets. So cringe there, right? Because they did not 4 years later win the Stanley Cup. Or plan the parade. Toronto will win a Stanley Cup. It's only a matter of when and how many. Now, technically, this group is still around and kicking and could make it happen, RJ. So technically, this is not wrong. They did learn their lesson from the Winnipeg.
Who's the three on there? Is it Matthews, Marner, and Nylander?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And they did learn their lesson from a couple years prior. They did not put a date on when it would happen the way they did with the Jets.
What year did that come out?
2018.
Okay.
Casual 7 years ago.
Oh my God. That's a really good question as to which is more cringe, because the Leafs one, I would just default to that, right? Being, oh my, it's just a matter of time and how many with that core. But at the time, it feels like a less egregious take than setting a date, an actual year for that Winnipeg Jets group. You could really make a good argument for either side.
I'm gonna let's maybe as the tiebreaker, I'll give you some other headlines on the cover.
Still could.
I'll give you some other headlines because I feel like that tips it for me. So if we go back to the Winnipeg one, the idea of tanking for Connor McDavid is brought up as a question of should teams do it? Would it be beneficial to tank for Connor McDavid? I don't know. And then the big headline, other question on the Leafs one is Casey Middlestat, Buffalo's burning ray of light.
Oh man. Okay. I'm sorry. I have to go with the Middlestat one. The Middlestat one pushes that over the top.
It does, right? It just does.
It really does. Because look, at least the McDavid one, there are news, articles or headlines or whatever, where the answer to the question is obviously yes, but you have to frame the headline as a question, right? Just for that. Okay. I get that. But the Middlestat one, burning ray of light.
Yes. And then I see people mentioning the nail can't fail one, and I will do that because I do want people to see the picture. But yes, from the draft preview in 2012, nail can't fail, and this is the picture. The article, nail can't fail. That's the big full page spread picture. Nail Yakubov. I know we're deep into red glare territory now, but I've been sitting on this for 2 weeks waiting on RJ. So
yeah, no, you needed to show me this. That is great. This is the kind of stuff. Oh man, I love it.
That's good. And I want to be able to interact with everybody too, not just do it on a red glare.
I have a whole stack of old hockey news in my parents' house. So I got to go look through those. We could just do a whole red glare episode on that. I have to do a video version so everyone could see how it looks.
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yes,
That's
it would be a lot of
content right there.
It would be so much fun for sure. All right, everybody.
He's the draft bus signal in the sky. I'm sorry, I love that from Draper. I had to get to that.
It is good. I want to thank everybody for joining us for this Emerald City Hockey post game live. Want to thank Queen Anne Beer Hall for sponsoring us. As always, RJ, we're going to be able to get over there soon, although not super soon because we've got ECH content every day this week.
every day this week. Yeah,
Welcome
no, I mean,
back.
we've got what, Saturday and Sunday, of course, the two back-to-back games. Then tomorrow we've got the deep dive podcast.
Yep.
Tuesday we
Live
have the
game
live
commentary.
commentary. Wednesday is your prospect chat. Thursday is the armchair GM stream, and then of course Friday Red Glare, where we're back together instead of the two episodes that we recorded separately. So just looking forward to all of that.
Yep, definitely. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to spending a lot of time with all of you as well. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you all next time. And then again and again, and then the day after that, and then the day after that.
Yep.